Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George Goodman. Today is August 16th, 2026. Welcome to the podcast. So, today I want to talk about U.S. federal government policy on taxing the rich. Now, I had to word this a couple of ways to extract different forms of data so that I could get to the point here and see what people think, the ordinary people, and what politicians think classify somebody as being rich, because the rhetoric in the midterms, they're talking about, they meaning Congress wants to tax the rich. Okay, so let's start with a couple of surveys and stuff, which is kind of interesting. So if you make $100,000 a year, and I'm assuming that they're saying a family of four, that's normally how they do the stats. So $100,000 a year is generally not considered rich. Now, they term it a little different here. That they love labels. Why it is comfortably above the median individual income, a six-figure salary now represents a solid middle class or upper middle class lifestyle rather than true wealth heavily constrained by location and family size, which would be true. Okay, now, national standing and statistics on who is considered rich in this country. Above average of income of $100,000, you're roughly in the top 20% of individual earners nationwide. Now, now they say individual income here, but above they say family. So that means both, I'm assuming. Now, upper, not the next one is not upper class. True rich or upper class status typically requires a significantly higher net worth, passive income, or earnings well past 250,000 to 500,000, depending on the definition. Now, lower middle class in high cost states. In about a dozen high cost states, California, New York, Massachusetts, and Hawaii, a household income of $100,000 falls into the lower middle class tier according to the Pew Research middle class scaling. Now, there's a question in there. Does Congress know that? All right. So when the rhetoric starts, you know now I've set the table on what the government thinks is somebody rich. All right. So they also throw in some other factors. So if you're living in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, your money doesn't go as far. Then it depends on the household size and then debt. Now, so you have to decide whether you are considered rich. Now, let's go back to how the government does it. Now, listen to this. The U.S. federal government policy on taxing the rich relies on a progressive individual income tax bracket system, preferential rates for long-term investments, and specialized wealth transfer taxes with current parameters defined primarily by the Our Best Days Are Before Us Act. Okay, so Congress did that. That's how the federal government determines it. Now, if we blend it together with what Forbes and some of these think tanks are putting out there, first of all, we have to know who's responding to these surveys. Okay, ordinary generally considered rich when they have a net worth of 2.2 million to 2.3 million. That's what ordinary people think of when you say that somebody is rich. Now, that's in line with what Forbes and the think tanks think as well. So it's 2.2 to 2.3 million dollars. Those are high income and rich people. So, surveys like Charles Schwab show everyday people place the wealthy mark at roughly 2.2 million. Financial comfort. Now, here's where it gets a little subjective. Just feeling safe and stable is often pegged much lower at around $840,000 in net worth. Compared to the U.S. median household net worth of about $192,900, having a true $1 million or multi-million dollar cushion feels comfortable, out of reach, and distinctly rich to most. Now, with that being said, that's how people campaign to get elected in office. They use the term they want to tax the rich. Now, there's a little bit of a conflict here because the taxing doesn't seem that Congress comes up with. So they got the federal poverty level for people to qualify for if they want to access services, etc. And then the other language is in how this graded tax bracket system works. And when you talk to ordinary people like me, I'm pretty ordinary. I think at my level, which isn't very high, I was getting taxed quite a bit too. So, but let's stay on course here. I'm not talking about people getting tax breaks and all that stuff. That would be a different podcast. So the government says that you are rich if you make those following categories again, and they have expanded it a little bit because they say rich, but who are they actually talking about? Right? Because I could be considered rich, maybe. Here's why: lifestyle and freedom. No budgeting needed. Ordinary people view being rich as a lifestyle where you do not have to price check groceries, plan months ahead for a vacation, or panic over an unexpected car repair or medical bill. Now, they got that from a think tank. Okay. Not working for survival. Having enough passive income or investments to quit a job without worrying is a huge marker of being rich. Okay. And then the third one is visible luxury. Driving luxury cars, wearing designer clothes, or owning a large home in a great neighborhood triggers the immediate label for ordinary people that you are rich, even if that person is carrying a heavy debt. Now, I think that one is very true. So, what ordinary people think and what the government thinks are totally different, like I said. Now, the think tanks, they think even differently. So there's no melding with the politicians to get into the details and say, hey, well, in this category, and give some true numbers. They keep saying millionaires and billionaires when all of us under $100,000 per se are still getting taxed because the federal government code says that there are progressive individual income tax bracket systems. So calling somebody rich doesn't seem to matter because they're going to tax you anyway, depending on how you fall on that table. Now, we're looking at top income brackets. We're looking at long-term capital gains, net investment income tax. Wow. And all of these sound complicated, and you are familiar with that, so there's no reason to go back through it. If you work, you are aware of these things, especially if you're making over $50,000 and you have a 401k and all of those things. So no need for me to go into that. That would be a little bit boring. All right. So now let's get to Congress now. The Democratic position. Congressional Democrats strongly favor increasing taxes on the wealthy, right? Wealthy equals rich. Lawmakers like, and I'm not going to call out any names, frequently introduce legislation such as Make Billionaires Pay Their Fair Share Act. Now that's specific, wealthy, and they're talking about the billionaires. Does that work? They argue the current tax code disproportionately favors passive investment over regular labor income. Now you decide if that's true or not. That is so broad, okay? But they use the word wealthy or rich, and then they say billionaires. That contradicts what I just told you. Now, Republican position. They oppose raising taxes on the wealthy. Party leaders contend that tax hikes stifle economic growth, kill jobs, and incentivize wealthy individuals to relocate their assets. They generally advocate for tax cuts and closing spending deficits instead. All right, so those are the two positions, and you have to decide because in this election season with the midterms, that is out there, and you hear it even in the commercials from these folks. And then they break it down into progressives and all of that stuff. So the progressives, real quick, push to overhaul the tax code to target accumulated net worth rather than just realized annual income. I'll say that again. That's what they want. They want to overhaul the tax code to target accumulated net worth rather than just realized annual income. So if you have any assets, and an asset is a 401k, and if you're in your 50s and you've worked your butt off, you could have over $1 million. That's an asset. All right. Ultra Millionaire Tax Act. So, policy seeks to a 2% annual wealth tax on household net worth between 50 million to $1 billion, and a 6% tax on net worths exceeding $1 billion. Right? And then the billionaire maximum income tax. Same deal. Boy, if you're making some real money, boy, they want to tax it. Okay, so I've laid it out for you, and you have to decide. The U.S. federal government policy on taxing the rich doesn't match what Congress is currently doing based on the analysis and the facts. They need to define greater who they consider rich. Now, they can use those tax brackets, but those aren't clear either, because at certain points, if you don't have exemptions and somebody who makes more money does, well, you're going to end up paying a greater percentage of taxes. So this is an important issue policy-wise that we need to look at when we are voting. So this is Just Listen, hosted by George Goodman. Let me know what you think, and please share, and then hopefully they will subscribe. Have a great day.